Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Well, we're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite topics. If you've been listening to me for a while, you know that it's one of my favorite topics, which is hormones. But today I've got the expert on bioidentical hormone therapy, which I haven't talked a ton about actually, as far as how we used it, the safety of it. We've had a few little podcast guests that have talked a little bit about it, but we're really going to dive into it today. My guest is Dr. Deb Mathews, the Happy Hormones Doctor. She is a best-selling author, international speaker, educator, wife, and mother of 4. After suffering for years with fatigue and irritability, her quest to resolve her personal health led her to change everything about her practice of medicine. She has been featured on national podcasts, radio, and broadcast shows, including NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox. So welcome, Dr. Mathews.
Oh, it's so great to be here. I love this topic too.
Yeah, I know. When I saw you, I actually saw you on something else and I was like, ooh, this is my kind of woman. We need to get her on the show. Because I haven't, like I said before, I haven't actually had a doctor here just to talk about the bioidentical hormones. I talk about it a lot and use it in my practice. And so this is going to be great to hear it from the hormone doctor yourself, all about it. So tell me a little bit about how you got into this, because were you running like a typical medical practice and then you got into this?
I was a regular old doctor writing prescriptions all day long. And I thought I was relatively healthy. I didn't have any diseases, nothing terrible that I knew of, but I didn't feel good. I was tired all the time. I couldn't lose weight no matter what I tried. And I was so irritable. I was flying off the handle at my kids way too often. And then I felt so guilty because I felt like I was the worst mom ever for always shrieking at my kids. And it was so confusing because nothing in my medical training helped me to understand what was happening to me.
And what age were you at when this was happening?
Well, I was only in my late 30s. And
Okay.
so, you don't really think about hormones when you're in your 30s. Like if you're 50, maybe you might think menopause, but it was young. And what really changed it for me is my husband, who he's really the one that bore the brunt of this whole Wicked Witch of the West impersonation.
Of course.
He found a book and he saw, the little blurb on the back of the book and recognized some of those symptoms. And he suggested that I might want to read this book. And it was a book by Suzanne Summers about hormones. And you can just imagine how much medical doctors love to get their information from celebrities, right? I mean, I was so negative and I did not want to read the book and I gave him a hard time, but I knew that something was wrong. And so I did read the book. And I got to tell you, that book changed my entire life, because when I read about the women in the book who were just like me and how much better they felt when they got their hormones balanced, suddenly everything made sense and I could really see what was going on. So that really allowed me to open my mind. And I learned there are places that doctors can go to become trained and to learn this whole different approach to thinking about health and wellness. So I got my own hormones back in balance. And I got my energy back. My kids got their mom back. My husband got his wife back, and I got my life back. But I could not go back to just writing prescriptions all day long because that just didn't make any sense anymore. So I've been practicing medicine this way, working with bioidentical hormones now for 14 years.
Wow. It's so fun. I have heard that similar, like on different podcasts, women doctors talking about how Suzanne Summers was their gateway into this field of work. I have her book as well. And thank goodness she did what she did, because she really did bring it to the general public. And her books are easy to understand.
Yeah. And, if I can just tell you, one of my little life highlights is I got to meet her. We both spoke at an event, and I got to, be on stage with her, and in front of the audience, I got to tell my story about how she changed my life. And because of her, now I'm able to help other women. And so it was a really touching moment for me.
Wow, that's great. And so when you were in your 30s and this was happening, so you at that time in your late 30s started to use bioidentical hormones.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So give us a little timeline of what starts to happen in our 30s, because most women, I remember being 33 and thinking like, okay, I'm not eating, well enough. I'm not exercising enough. I can't lose the weight. I'm only 33 years old. Like I was trying to do everything that the doctors were telling me to do and what the books were telling me to do. And nobody once said to me, it's your hormones. And it did end up, like you, I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. I didn't have a husband at the time to tell me, hey, this is what's happening. And I had to figure it out on my own. But I thought, you know what, there's something else going on here. And I ended up getting my hormones checked and realizing at 33, I had major hormone dysfunction. So we don't think that it's happening in our 30s.
No, you wouldn't expect it. But the reality is that as we go through our 30s, the main hormone that's changing is progesterone. And progesterone is progestational. That's the one that helps us get pregnant. So that's part of the reason why it gets more difficult to get pregnant when you get to your 40s. But progesterone is changing when we're in our 30s. In fact, it can decline as much as 80% over the decade of our 30s. And then it's very common when women get into their 40s. So progesterone is a really common problem for women way before they hit menopause. And if progesterone levels start to drop, we don't feel good. Progesterone is a calming hormone. It helps us to feel chilled out and relaxed and easygoing. It's kind of sort of like nature's version of a glass of red wine or an Ambien. We sleep better. So what ends up happening is we can feel more irritable, more anxious. We don't sleep soundly. We can wake up in the middle of the night. We can start having night sweats. And these changes often are very cyclic. So a really common pattern would be that, so you have your period and the week after your period is the good week. That's the week where you're going to the gym and you're chopping your broccoli and you're cleaning out your closets. And then as you get towards your period, things kind of go downhill and you get irritable and anxious and the PMS symptoms, you just want to eat the whole fridge and you don't feel like going to the gym and you're not the nicest version of yourself. And then your period starts again and you start to feel like a new person. So this good week after your period, bad week before your period can become kind of pronounced. And, if you have PMS and you're kind of grouchy, like one day out of the month, so fine, you'll get over that. But for some women, it's 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10, 14 days. Like it can really be a big deal. And when we're not at our best, it doesn't just affect us. It affects our kids, it affects, our significant others, It can affect our coworkers. Like we're just not at our best.
Yeah. Well, I notice when I don't take my progesterone in the second half of my cycle that I snap at my children way more, that I'm flying off the handle. So I always, I got to get back on my progesterone.
Yeah. And, I have a theory, which is probably not very politically correct, but there's all these Karens out there right now, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens to us when our progesterone is not where it should be is we feel irritable. Things just really, tick us off, and we let things fly out of our mouth that really we probably should just keep to ourselves. And so it's that kind of difficulty, like keeping it zipped when you should, that sometimes, maybe some of these Karens need a little hormone adjustment and get their progesterone balanced. That's my theory. I don't know.
Well, this Karen needs it. So, and then, so 30s, we're seeing progesterone drop. Now, does this drop in progesterone affect weight?
Yes. So if your estrogen is still fine, but your progesterone is going downhill, we call that estrogen dominance, meaning that relatively there's more estrogen compared with progesterone. Estrogen is a hormone that tells things to grow and divide, like fat cells in your butt and your hips and your thighs. And the progesterone is the hormone that tells things to stop growing and dividing. So when you have this estrogen dominance, we are more likely to gain weight. And that's on top of, we are more likely to not be on our best behavior before our period. And so, eating the wrong things and not exercise, just not doing all the right things to look after ourselves during that period of the month. So yes, if you are estrogen dominant, weight gain, fluid retention, bloating, feeling puffy, and some women, it's quite pronounced, like they can gain 5 or even 10 pounds leading into their period. And then on the other end of their period, they can lose that again. So that's not quite the same thing as gaining body fat, but nonetheless, you don't want to go up and down 10 pounds over your menstrual cycle. I mean, that's kind of extreme, but it can even happen that significantly.
Yeah, from fluid retention.
Yes, exactly.
Wow. And then, okay, so 30s, we're looking at a progesterone deficiency is being most common. What's happening then as we go through our 40s?
Yes. So as we go through our 40s, that can get more and more pronounced. And as we have this estrogen dominance, a lot of times we start to see menstrual changes. So heavier periods, more PMS, can start to get irregular periods, more of the night sweats. So it's super common for me to have women coming in and they're having all these night sweats and they have to get up and change the sheets and put new pajamas on. It's so disruptive. Like, we need good quality sleep, and those night sweats wake people up. And when that's really the case, that it's the night sweats, not daytime hot flashes, it is still usually a progesterone problem. And the progesterone helps you to sleep better, gets rid of the night sweats, makes periods lighter. But a lot of women in their 40s are starting to have fibroids. They're starting to have, like, be told that they need a hysterectomy. And, you know, it's this bleeding. I mean, who wants to be bleeding all the time? And the heavy periods, like, nobody wants that. But a hysterectomy is not always the only answer, or an ablation, which is where they treat the lining of your uterus. At least that's less invasive. But it's a hormone imbalance. And so if we can balance the hormones back out again, we can make the bleeding less. And, you know, sometimes we can save some uteri. But so in our 40s, it's still progesterone.
Still progesterone. And then eventually estrogen.
Yeah. And so once we get somewhere around 50, there, you know, sometimes it's late 40s, sometimes it's into our 50s. That's when progesterone tends to drop. And when estrogen tends to drop, and then everything changes.
Progesterone's already long gone by that point.
Long gone. By this point, though, estrogen is energizing. It is a natural antidepressant. It's also important for sleep. It's important for brain function of every capacity, like remembering why you walked in the room, where you left the car keys, where you parked the car, what that person's name is, what the heck is going on. Like, it gets to the point where you got to have sticky notes for your sticky notes just to try to remember. And of course, you can get hot flashes in the daytime. You can get the vaginal dryness. Sex can become painful. I would say that the number one thing, though, that I hear women complain about is that their brain is just not working. Like, you know, just can't remember things. And that's really alarming. The hot flashes are annoying, but when your brain is just not quite doing what it needs to do, that's kind of scary, because you can't help worry that this is like the first sign of, you know, early Alzheimer's or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can tell when women are deficient in estrogen when I talk to them, because they'll try and find the words and they're talking really slow like this, and you're going, okay, it's okay, you just don't have any estrogen.
And you know, so we got this estrogen, right? And we need to talk more about estrogen, because women are scared of estrogen. Yes. And I think that's just this horrible disservice that we've done to women. But there are three other hormones that I think are at least worth mentioning. And one of them is testosterone. And that one, I would even go back to say, in our 40s, I see that a lot. So we need testosterone just like men do. We just don't have nearly as much as men, but testosterone is important for confidence, self-esteem, assertiveness, competitive drive. It's your get up and go and get things done. And so what happens if testosterone goes down is we just kind of feel flat. It's not maybe like you're sobbing and hopeless and in despair, but you know, you just put one foot in front of the other and you make your way through your day and you do what you got to do. But all those extra things that maybe they don't have to happen today, we often just kind of leave them by the wayside because we're just not really feeling it. And that's not how we want to live. We want to live fully and, you know, have full enjoyment. And then of course, testosterone is important for everything to do with sex. Yeah. Thinking about it in the first place, carrying, you know, arousal, vaginal lubrication, all the rest of it. So all that kind of goes out the window. And for muscle tone. So a lot of women in their 40s will come in and say that they've been working out really hard, especially if they're trying to lose weight, but yet they feel like they've lost muscle mass, they've lost muscle definition. And no matter how hard they're working out, they're just not really seeing any changes. And that's a really common one with low testosterone.
Yeah. And I think I read in your book too, that there was testosterone and estrogen being really, they play on each other.
They do. They need to be balanced with each other. And so, you know, and the estrogen and progesterone need to be in balance too.
Yes.
And then the other two hormones I just want to mention here, one is cortisol. And cortisol is our main stress hormone. It goes up when we're stressed, but but it's cumulative over our lifetime. So it does tend to rise. So all our other hormones are going downhill into the toilet, but this one is going up a lot of times. And when cortisol goes up, it makes us gain weight, especially right around our midsection. It gives food cravings and mood problems, and we don't sleep well and anxious and all sorts of issues. And eventually though, so I think a lot of people know high cortisol, bad, right? Belly fat, you know, but what can happen is over time, our system just can't put all that cortisol out and it starts to drop inappropriately. Now we don't have enough cortisol, and that's actually worse. So if you don't have enough cortisol, then you just feel burned out, wiped out, exhausted. Every little thing feels so exhausting. You know, just getting home from the grocery store, unloading the groceries and getting supper on the table is just like enough to make you feel wiped out. So back when I was in my 30s, my progesterone was not doing well. But part of the reason for that was because my cortisol, I had 4 little kids. I'd been through, you know, medical school residency. I was burned out. And so your body can use progesterone to make some cortisol. And so when you have more stress, it just makes the progesterone problem that much worse. So the younger you are, the more likely it is that there's some underlying thing going on that's pulling your progesterone down. And so dealing with stress is a hugely important thing for women when we're trying to get our hormones back in balance. And then the last one is thyroid, which of course sets our metabolic rate. And if thyroid's not right, you know, weight loss is really difficult. So that's a whole nother topic. But when you have estrogen dominance, that interferes with how your thyroid functions. And so even if your thyroid gland is okay, when you've got this estrogen dominance, your thyroid hormone can't work properly. You feel like you've got hypothyroid, and then your doctor says everything is fine. Or if your cortisol is out of whack, it makes it so your thyroid hormone can't work. So once again, you feel terrible, you're gaining weight, you're exhausted all the time, but your doctor says your thyroid is normal, which is so frustrating. So all these hormones work together, and we need them to all be in balance in order to feel our best.
Mm-hmm. So many people would say, you know, I have a sister, for instance, who is determined to go through menopause without taking any hormones. She wants to do it naturally. And you hear that a lot, women saying, oh, and they say it as though it's this
badge of honor.
Totally. Yes, like they're so like, I'm going to do this naturally. No, I'm not going to take the hormones. In this idea, like they're bad. So where does this come from? I know that there was the study done, the Women's Health Initiative, that I'd like for you to talk about. It just, there is still so much, even though that was so long ago, the whole system still thinks that. I just heard it the other day. A lady said, oh, my doctor said when I went to get my mammogram, I put on my sheet that I was taking progesterone cream. And she freaked on her and said, oh my gosh, you have to get off that right away. You can't be on that. Okay.
So I admire women for wanting to do things naturally. That's Same. So much of what I do in my practice. We want to do things naturally. We don't want to rely on drugs or synthetic chemicals, you know, so their heart is in the right place. And I totally admire that. The thing is with hormones, kind of like with taking nutritional supplements, it's just replacing what your body actually needs in order to make us healthier. And the reason that it is considered scary, bad, you know, increases our risk for breast cancer, all these things, is that study that you're talking about. When I was in medical school back in the early 90s, we were taught that all women should go on hormone replacement therapy for their own good because it was going to help protect their heart, their brain, and their bones. Except what they taught us to do is we gave everybody the same pill, the same dose. And for some people, it was too much. They had a lot of side effects. For other people, it wasn't enough. It didn't help them. We weren't personalizing things. So there were a lot of women who didn't want to take the hormones because it didn't feel good. The other thing, though, was we were giving women these pills that had drugs in them, part of which were man-made chemicals never found in a woman's body before. But we didn't realize as doctors that it was important for the hormones to be exactly the same as what's in our body. And this Women's Health Initiative study came out in 2002, and it said that more women were getting breast cancer if they were on the hormones. So as you can imagine, everybody panicked. Women panicked, doctors panicked, we all panicked. And women went off their hormones in droves. But we've had like almost 20 years now to go back and understand more. And what we understand is that in that study, the women who got estrogen only, those were women who'd had a hysterectomy. They got a pill with just estrogen. Now the estrogen it's from horse's urine, it's Premarin. So it's not exactly the same as human estrogen. It's natural in the sense that it's from nature, but those women did not have an increase in the risk for breast cancer. We looked at women in their 50s, in their 60s, in their 70s. They did not statistically have an increase in the risk for breast cancer if they were on estrogen. The other group of women who still had their uterus and all their parts, they were given the same estrogen pill with a drug form of progesterone, because that was the most common thing that was around at that time. We didn't really understand that that was an issue. So when the women who got this combo pill did have an increase in the risk of breast cancer, it was a tiny little increase. It made it sound like women were dropping like flies from breast cancer, but statistically there was an increase. So at the time, we're telling every woman in America that she needs to go on hormone replacement therapy for her own good. And so even if a tiny number of people are getting breast cancer, then maybe we really needed to rethink our message.
Wasn't it like 8 cases?
Yes. Yeah, I think it might have been like 9 cases,
8, 9, yeah, okay.
10,000 women or something. Yeah. It was a really tiny number. So you're, 99.9 something % chance of not getting breast cancer as a result of using your hormones. But it sounded really scary. And we as women are really scared of breast cancer. The truth is more of us are going to die from heart disease, but somehow we don't lie awake at night worrying about heart attacks in the same way that we really do worry about breast cancer. So we don't want to do anything that's going to increase our risk for breast cancer. And I don't want to do anything that's going to increase my risk. But what we know about the hormones is that when we use the bioidentical form of progesterone, that means the hormone that is an exact match for the hormone that our ovaries make. When we use that kind of progesterone, we didn't see an increase in the risk for breast cancer. So it matters what form of hormones we give, whether it's the natural form that's the same as in a woman's body, or whether we're using the synthetic drugs. And it's really the progesterone one that matters the most, because natural progesterone is breast protective, whereas the synthetic one did not protect breasts and therefore ended up having more breast cancer. So for women who are perimenopausal, the women in their 30s and in their 40s who have this estrogen dominance, like this lady you were saying, her mammogram and she was on progesterone cream, this imbalance is a risk factor for breast cancer, because breast cancer is caused by environmental toxins. 10% of the time it's from genes, 90% of the time it's from all these chemicals in the environment and from radiation, et cetera. So if there's a cell somewhere in the body trying to grow up to be a tumor, estrogen fuels its growth and progesterone hinders its growth. So when you have estrogen dominance, you are stepping on the gas, but you don't have anything on the brakes. So in this case, replacing the natural progesterone should be reducing the risk of premenopausal breast cancer. Why are we not doing a gigantic study where we're taking all these women, 35 to 50, and putting them on natural progesterone and then standing back to see how many of them get breast cancer?
Yeah.
That study ought to be done. But there's a huge economic disincentive, for pharmaceutical companies, and there's all sorts of politics involved. And unfortunately, women get caught in the middle. But the bottom line is there are a lot of benefits of hormone replacement therapy on your energy, your mood, your weight, your libido, your gut health, your skin, whether you get urinary tract infections, whether you pee your pants when you go for a run or jump on your mini trampoline. So there's all these benefits, and staying away from hormones out of fear is really too bad, and it's really unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Everything that I've read about it, all the research that's been done now in bioidentical hormone therapy and how safe it is. And I've recently heard of, I can't remember his name now, but there's a doctor in the States who's a leading breast cancer oncologist who's using high doses of estrogen to treat breast cancer.
Yeah. So Avram Blooming is somebody who wrote a book called Estrogen Matters, which is a great book. I'm not sure if that's exactly who you're talking about, but he's an oncologist.
No. Well, maybe that is who it is.
Maybe it is. He wrote this really good book. It's called Estrogen Matters. And so he did a really great job of going through all the research and sort of pointing out all the problems with that one study that scared the pants off of us, and what the data really shows, and why women shouldn't feel like they have to suffer out of fear.
I had Dr. Maish Seibel on, who wrote The Estrogen Window, who also talks about it. With Avram Blooming, there is controversy.
There is controversy because he doesn't really talk about bioidentical hormones.
No, because he's invested in a new drug that the pharmaceutical company that made Premarin is now coming out with a bioidentical oral drug. So for those listening, pharmaceutical companies can't patent bioidentical creams. So there's no money in it for them. So they need to make it as a pill form in order to monetize on it, to make money from it. So anyways, I've heard that he is behind that, which is too bad, because now it's like, so let's talk about that actually. Oral versus transdermal or other means of getting the bioidentical hormones, because there is there's lots of different ways you can be taking these hormones. So let's talk about the safety of that.
So just like the different forms of whether it's synthetic estrogen or natural estrogen, synthetic progesterone, natural progesterone, there is synthetic testosterone. That's just, why would you want to take something? You wouldn't want synthetic vitamin C. You wouldn't want a synthetic tomato. It doesn't make sense. But if you take estrogen orally, because everything that you swallow gets absorbed from your blood, from your gut, and it goes through your liver first, and then it goes out to the rest of your body. So when you swallow estrogen as a pill, your liver gets the whole dose of estrogen all at one time, and that triggers a release of more blood clotting factors. So we know this. We know that if we give you estrogen in a pill, it increases your risk for blood clots. It doesn't matter if it's birth control pills or hormone replacement therapy. Now, if you're 19 years old and you're on birth control pills because you need birth control, your risk for a blood clot is so low that even though it's there, we don't worry so much about it. But when you're in your 40s, when you're in your 50s, when you're in your 60s, nobody wants a stroke. So, taking a pill just is unnecessary. We can give you estrogen through your skin. There are topical creams, there are patches. You can use the creams vaginally. We can even dissolve lozenges under your tongue so that it goes right in your bloodstream. There's all sorts of other ways that it can be done. There's just no need to take the risk of a blood clot when you swallow a pill. For progesterone, the capsule actually is used a fair amount because even though the same thing, you swallow it, it has to go through your liver, but your liver processes it into another, it's called allopregnanolone, and it goes to your brain and it really calms your brain and it helps you sleep better. So the synthetic kind of progesterone increases your risk for blood clots. The natural form hasn't been shown to increase your risk for blood clots. And because it gives us benefits, sometimes we do use the progesterone in a capsule. Testosterone in a capsule is not the best idea because of its effect on your liver too. So how it is prescribed to you really does make a difference in terms of when you're thinking about your risks and your benefits.
Mm-hmm. In your practice, have you found that oral progesterone, Prometrium, does it help to slough off that uterine lining? So when you take estrogen, your uterine lining can build up and you need to take progesterone in order to slough it off, to save yourself from the uterine cancer and all the growth factor of estrogen. I have read two different things on that, which is that oral progesterone, because it converts into that metabolite allopregnanolone, that it doesn't save the uterus. And then I've read that, yes, it does. So what's your opinion and what have you seen in your practice?
So I use both. I use both the oral form and I use the topical form, depending on what symptoms someone is having, how they feel. Because for example, the oral one is more calming, but sometimes people are sensitive and it's too calming and then they feel like heavy and draggy. And so then the oral one's not a good choice. We need the topical. And sometimes we use the topical one, but people aren't sleeping and they're just so anxious and irritable. And so the capsule just really makes a big difference. So I really do more choosing which way to go based on somebody's symptoms and how they feel and their personal preference. Would they rather apply a cream or take a pill? I also have seen varying degrees. So in the regular medical world, they are 100% convinced that only the oral progesterone works. And when you give somebody a topical cream, it doesn't protect their uterus at all. There are some people in the more holistic minded world who believe that the cream works better than the capsules. There's also a debate over, does a cream need to be used vaginally in order to properly protect your uterus? Or if you're, putting it on your arm or your thigh, does it really work? So what I would say is we want to make sure that a woman is not having spotting, or we're not trying to cause a period. So if there's vaginal bleeding after menopause, then that's telling us that, there's a problem and we need a uterine ultrasound. We need to evaluate further, but we can tell whether it's working with a uterine ultrasound. So if we do a uterine ultrasound and we see the lining of the uterus is too thick, then we know the progesterone's not doing the job. If we see that the lining of the uterus is nice and thin, then we know that it's doing well. And what I see in clinical practice is that they both seem to work. And if we look at our younger women, our 30s and 40s-year-old women who are having these heavy periods, we can give progesterone cream or progesterone capsules. And either way, as long as we give them the right dose for that person, it makes their periods lighter, so we know that it's having an impact on their uterus. So I would say the jury is still out on this one, but I use both and I think they're both okay.
Well, it sounds like that they both work. So maybe maybe the jury's in on it. And we can decide that. So what about when women have a hysterectomy? Doctors will tend to just prescribe estrogen and say, oh, you don't need progesterone because you don't have a uterus.
So what I tell women is that we being the doctors who work with the bioidentical hormones, we give progesterone to all of our patients who have a brain, because you have progesterone receptors on every single cell in your body. And the part of your body that has the most progesterone receptors is your brain. So it's no wonder that when we're low in progesterone, we're screaming at our kids and, irritable, and we're not sleeping well. It affects our brain. So we want balanced estrogen and progesterone for breast health. We want it for brain health. We don't want to get puffy from fluid retention. The progesterone is a natural diuretic, whereas estrogen causes us to retain fluid. There are so many different ways that these two hormones need to balance each other out. And so in the conventional medical world, where they think you don't need the progesterone, what they are used to prescribing is the synthetic drug form of progesterone, which is the one that has the very small increase in the risk for breast cancer. So they're prescribing a drug to prevent uterine cancer, but that drug increases your risk for breast cancer. So you can kind of see how they wouldn't really be all on board with giving it when they didn't feel like it was necessary. But if we're using a natural kind of progesterone, it's a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what about estrogen when it comes to weight? Because there's so much talk about estrogen dominance being this huge issue, which it is, because like you said, the progesterone starts to drop first, and we see a lot of this estrogen dominance in women is causing weight gain. So women have this idea like estrogen is going to make me fat. So what's been your experience as far as when women are going through perimenopause and menopause and they get the weight gain, the 10, 20 pounds of weight gain that come with it because of that estrogen and progesterone dropping? Have you seen in your practice, as far as weight loss goes, how does this help?
Yes. So estrogen is like the Goldilocks hormone, not too much, not too little, needs to be just right. So estrogen dominance is a problem, can cause weight gain. But when estrogen drops, that also causes weight gain, especially right around our middle. Like so many women come in complaining of belly fat and like thick around their midsection around menopause. Estrogen affects how well insulin works, and insulin's the one that regulates our blood sugar and our metabolism. So low estrogen promotes weight gain. And it's not unusual. I wish I could guarantee this for everybody, but it's not unusual for somebody to come in who's already got good lifestyle habits. They've been trying their best to eat well. They've been exercising like nothing's working, and they just can't lose the extra 5 or 10 or 20 pounds. And we get their hormones balanced. We get them on natural hormone replacement therapy. And when they come back for their follow-up appointment, they're so happy because they've lost the weight and they just kept doing the things they were doing before, but finally now it worked. So the hormones absolutely are so important for your weight. And what I believe is that all of us deserve to have balanced hormones, whether we're balancing our hormones with bioidentical hormones, with nutritional supplements, with lifestyle habits, whatever it is that we're doing, we all deserve to have balanced hormones, because hormones tell our cells what to do. And when your hormones are out of whack, your cells are getting the wrong messages, they're not doing the right things, and things don't work properly.
Mhm. For the women that have come in that, they eat well, they exercise, which is a lot of my listeners, and they are put on hormone replacement to help them to lose the weight and get rid of all of these nasty symptoms that are coming. Women, of course, they tend to focus on the weight. When it doesn't work, when you replace the hormones and the woman doesn't lose the weight, even though she's eating right and exercising, has there been things like little tricks, tools kind of thing that you've seen work then for women like that are really the tough cases?
Yeah. So assuming that they've got their lifestyle habits dialed in and we've got the hormones balanced. And when I say hormones balanced, I mean the menopausal hormones, the estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. We've got cortisol straightened out. We've got thyroid managed. We've got insulin working properly. So assuming all of those things have already been done, then we want to look for inflammation, because when there's too much inflammation, that affects leptin, which is the hunger hormone, and it can be really difficult to lose weight, or adiponectin, which is a hormone that tells your cells to burn fat for fuel, and that one can be too low. So inflammation still interferes with our hormone signaling for weight loss. We need to think about hidden food sensitivities. That's a really, really common one. So it could be that a woman is eating foods that are perfectly healthy for everybody else, but if her immune system has developed a reaction to that food, and you may not even have symptoms, you may not notice anything when you eat it, because we call these hidden food sensitivities, but still nonetheless it causes inflammation on the inside. And so figuring out and eliminating those foods, at least temporarily, can really help women lose weight when they're stuck. And then we still sometimes need to dig even deeper for other things like heavy metals or mold toxicity or hidden infections or nutrient deficiencies. So sometimes we really need to look at the big picture, because honestly, sometimes the hormone symptoms or the hormone imbalances are also a symptom of something deeper that's going on. So if a woman has mercury toxicity or the wrong microbes in her gut, her microbiome is messed up, too much yeast, that's another really common one that we see that promotes weight gain. A lot of these kinds of underlying factors are stresses on the system, cause cortisol to go out of whack, because cortisol is trying to help cope with the stress. And cortisol is a regulating hormone. It regulates all the other ones. So that throws the other hormones out of whack. And so now you get more of these perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms. So you walk in the door to your doctor's office complaining of hot flashes or vaginal dryness or heavy periods or whatever, but really the problem started way over here. And so this is where we need to address. And the younger you are, the more likely it is that if we address these other factors, your hormones will just go right back into balance. You won't need bioidentical hormones.
Yeah. So when a woman is younger and she is, say, in her 30s, if you put her on progesterone cream, will this stop her own production of her progesterone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if we are giving her a physiologic amount, meaning, about as much as a woman would naturally make, and we're doing it during the luteal phase of her cycle, which is the last 2 weeks before her period, it should not shut down her own natural production of progesterone. We should be augmenting it. With all of these hormones, if we went completely ridiculously overboard and gave an enormous dose, we could shut things down. But, assuming that you're working with somebody who is, just giving you a standard dose, it shouldn't really turn things off. But, we give women birth control pills every day. And birth control pills, which are synthetic drugs never found in the human body, they're not actually our hormones. They're just chemicals that mimic our hormones. They completely turn off your hormones. So we do that all the time. And the challenge, and we frequently do it for women in their 30s and 40s who are complaining their periods are irregular or heavy, or they're having more PMS. So we just stick them on birth control pills, and that's considered to be the answer. But that's just turning off your own hormones and replacing it with something that's not really quite the same thing. And then when you stop the birth control pills, whatever the underlying problem that was causing the problem in the first place is still there. It's not really always the best solution.
It's funny how the medical society and just society in general has no problem and don't question birth control pills, that they'll easily prescribe that. It's like a very highly prescribed drug. But then that same doctor will say, No, you can't take hormones when you're in menopause.
And, basically the synthetic form of hormone replacement therapy, which is what I'm not really recommending, it's just a lower dose of birth control pill, but it's a lower dose. So we're perfectly happy giving the higher dose birth control pills to, women.
Shut down ovulation. Yeah.
So, for each woman, we need to really consider her personal risks and benefits, her personal symptoms, her choices. Like, it should be a conversation, and there's no one right answer for everybody. We shouldn't be, everybody needs to do it the same way. I really believe that this should be very personalized. The dosing should be personalized. It should be adjusted. But it really should be something that is done in partnership with a practitioner. And that's not really how most doctors work, right? Doctors have to see patients like every 8 minutes, to get people through their office. And you can't really take all the time to sit down and talk about it. It's so much easier just to write a prescription and be on to the next patient. So I think women deserve better than that.
Yeah, me too. Do you find that most women then, when they hit that perimenopause in the later 40s, 50s, do most of your patients, are they mostly put on the estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone? Like, do you find those three tend to always go together?
Not always. So it is common that progesterone, I would say, is the most common. And then for women, before menopause, frequently they need progesterone and testosterone. Once women get into, full on menopause, it would be even more common, though, that we would do all three of those. Sometimes women are still able to maintain a decent amount of testosterone because you can make some of these hormones in your adrenal glands. So even when your ovaries shut down, some women can still make some of the hormones. So it's individual, and everybody's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And women who are overweight, your body fat can make estrogen. So a menopausal woman who is overweight sometimes will actually have a pretty decent amount of estrogen in her system. So she could actually be still estrogen dominant, even though she's not having periods anymore and she's gone through menopause. So, we just need to individualize it for everybody.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite way of applying it, getting it into the person?
Well, I guess once again, I would have to say that it is personalized, but I work with, as long as it's bioidentical, I'll do it. So I work with all of these different creams and patches and pills and pellets too, which is where it looks like a little tic tac and it goes under your skin. So I offer all these options to my patients, so I can tell you what my patients prefer. Okay. So for progesterone, the progesterone capsules are more popular than the topical cream because they feel it more, right? They feel better, but not everybody likes it better. For testosterone, the pellets are by far the most popular. So not for everybody. And we want to do it in a prudent way. There are some clinics out there where all they do is pellets, and whatever you walk in the door with, you're going to walk out the door with a pellet. I don't really think that's the best way to do it because pellets are not the only way, and people should always have options. But I can tell you that in my practice, women prefer pellets for testosterone over the other options. And then for estrogen, the patch is actually quite popular too. It's bioidentical, but it comes from, the regular old pharmacy. It's covered by health insurance. So we use creams, we use pellets, we use patches. We do all different ways of doing it. But some people prefer one way or another.
Yeah, that's great. And is there anything that helps a woman's body to accept the hormones better?
So that's actually a really great question. We always want to put the hormones in a healthy body. Because if we're worried about risks of hormones, side effects, could the hormones make some cancer that was already in there grow faster? We always want to make sure that we're putting the hormones in a healthy body. So you need enough antioxidants in your system, right, from your fruits and vegetables. You need to be managing stress in a healthy way so that cortisol is not out of whack. We want you to be eating cruciferous vegetables, because the broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts, these vegetables actually have nutrients in them that help you metabolize estrogen in a healthier way so that it can do its job and less risk of being metabolized into the harmful potential estrogens. We want you to be eating healthy fats in your diet, avocado and coconut oil and olive oil, because these healthy fats help you metabolize estrogen in a healthy way, whereas the seed oils like safflower, canola, those ones would push estrogen to metabolize in the wrong direction. Alcohol is really not good for women's hormones. I know that they say a little bit of red wine is good for your heart, but no amount of alcohol is good for breast cancer risk, because your liver has to metabolize your hormones and get them out of your system in order to make way for tomorrow's hormones. Whether tomorrow's hormones are coming from your ovaries naturally or whether they're coming from bioidentical hormone replacement. And so if your liver gets stuck having to clear out the alcohol, then it doesn't do as good of a job to clear out the hormones. And in some of these studies where we have been looking at breast cancer in women on hormone replacement, the women who drank more had the greater risk. And we know that for alcohol, every one drink per day increases your risk by 10%. So if you have one alcoholic drink per day, your risk for breast cancer goes up 10%.
Wow.
2 drinks a day, your risk goes up 20%. 3 drinks a day goes up 30%. So instead of worrying about hormone replacement therapy, let's worry about how much wine we're drinking during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Vitamin D is also really, really important for cancer prevention. And so if you're going to be on hormone replacement therapy, you don't want to be deficient in vitamin D. It's a simple blood test. It's a tiny little pill. They're inexpensive. It's readily available. So there's so much that we should be doing anyway, whether you're going to be on hormone replacement therapy or not, in order to keep your body healthy so that you can get all the benefits of the hormones and really do our very best to minimize any of the risks.
Mm-hmm. And so do majority of people that you work with, can you pretty much get rid of all symptoms? Should we be able to get rid of all symptoms if we're eating right, exercising, and taking bioidentical hormone therapy? Can a woman sail through menopause?
It is possible.
Okay.
So what I usually tell people is, if you come in and get started, within 30 days, you should be feeling better. So maybe not perfect in 30 days, but if you don't feel better within 30 days, we missed something big. We got to go back to the drawing board. But when women come in, we have a whole checklist, right? You circle like all the symptoms, you're not sleeping and vaginal dryness, all this stuff. And when they come back in again, usually at the 3-month visit is when a lot of times there's just nothing left to circle. So
nice.
Everybody's different, and a lot of it is on each one of us to take care of ourselves and, eat our broccoli and go to yoga class and do all the things we're supposed to do. But it is possible, and it is not necessary to suffer.
Yeah.
I believe that we all deserve to love the way that we feel, and I do believe that it's possible.
Yeah, me too. I just wish more women would know that, because I think we're being told to kind of suck it up, or here's your antidepressant, or you just have to get through this. It's just 8 to 10 years and you'll be okay.
And there have been studies that have shown that women who go through perimenopause, who have this estrogen dominance, have more symptoms of depression. And if we get their hormones balanced, their depression goes away. So we can give them Prozac and Celexa and all these antidepressants, but it's not fixing the real problem. And so it doesn't really make them all the way better. Maybe it keeps you out of the pits of despair if you're really horribly depressed, but they're not happy pills. They don't give you that spark back, but the hormones can.
Mm-hmm. And I've recently read about how, I think it was even 1 year on hormone replacement, once a woman hits menopause, reduces all-cause mortality by, I'm not going to remember, I think 30% or something. It was a high number. I was quite shocked. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So it's not just helping get you through this time that can be very challenging. Looking into the future, it can help prevent a lot of different major killers of women.
Yeah, I really enjoy listening to a doctor named Dr. Lindsay Berkson.
She's my favorite. Yeah, I love her.
And she talks a lot about how women going on hormones can help prevent Medicare from, Social Security from going bankrupt. Because if we are all active and, participating in our community and helping to raise our grandchildren, we can be valuable members of society, as opposed to if we're frail little old ladies and we broke our hip and we're in a wheelchair in a personal care home and we don't remember our family's name anymore, then we're a burden on society. None of us want to be a burden. Forget about society. None of us want to be a burden on our family. And it's really, really hard to imagine yourself, 20, 30 years in the future. So I find that it's hard to motivate ourselves to do things today for what's going to happen so far ahead in the future. But it's a good side effect is if we look after ourselves today, we're much less likely to be in a bad way, when the future does show up.
Exactly. Now, can I ask how old you are?
I'm 52. I'm going to be 53 now.
Okay. You're saying you were in med school in the 90s. So I was trying to figure out, I was like, because as most women that I know that take bioidentical hormones, they always look extremely young, and you do. Your skin is gorgeous. So if those of you who are listening on the podcast, you can go check her out on the video cast, because she looks great. And I really do notice that when women take bioidentical hormones, like I use it on my face. I use my estrogen. I'll put some DHEA cream. I kind of rotate whatever hormones on my face, and it makes a huge difference in pore size and my fine lines. And it does.
The problem is, like the dermatologists and the estheticians, they can't tell you to put hormones on your face, because when you put the hormones on your skin, it gets in your body, right? I mean, but if you are going to be on the hormones, you can put them there. You wouldn't want to put testosterone on your face, could make you break out, but the estrogen and progesterone are great. There was a study where somebody sat in the waiting room at a gynecologist's office, and as the women came in for their appointment, they guessed how old they were. And then the women went in and they got their estrogen level tested. And what they found is the women who had the higher levels of estrogen looked on average 8 years younger than the women who had the lowest levels of estrogen, because estrogen prevents the fine lines and the wrinkles and the dryness. It just puts that glow to your skin.
Yeah. I've actually, I think there's only one study that was actually done on, I think it was estriol on the face, but that it didn't raise body levels of estriol, because something about the capillaries in the face, I think it was. I'm probably not getting this right.
I haven't read that study.
No, okay, but it was great.
Yeah, you can get that over the counter.
Yeah, and it reduced in the 60% of the women, their pore size reduced, their fine lines reduced, and their skin thickened a little bit. Like the collagen was better after 3 months of using it. So interesting. Yeah. Well, tell everybody, because you've got a great free book, which I've read twice now already.
So one of the things that I think is a big problem is there are a lot of women who don't feel good, but they don't know why they don't feel good. And when they go to their doctor and they complain they don't feel good, they get antidepressants, sleeping pills, like their usual deal. So I want women to be able to figure out for themselves whether hormones could be the cause of why they're not feeling good. So I wrote a book. It's called This Is Not Normal, A Busy Woman's Guide to Symptoms of Hormone Imbalance. And it has lots of checklists and quizzes that you can do in order to figure out whether, could you have low testosterone? Could it be your thyroid? Is it an adrenal problem? And you can get a free copy of the book at isityourhormones.com.
Awesome. I'm going to put that in the show notes, everybody, so you guys it'll just be a direct link so you can go download the book. It's great. It's instant, easy read, but it's Amazon too. It's awesome. Is it free on Amazon too?
It's not free on Amazon, but if somebody wants a paper copy, it is available on Amazon.
Right.
If you just want the free download, isityourhormones.com.
Yeah. And so where can people find you, and are you taking clients?
Yeah. So I am in Charlotte, North Carolina, and my practice website is signaturewellness.org. We have lots of blog posts and information on the website if somebody wants more information to look there. We are taking new patients. You need to either come to us in North Carolina or be somewhere in North Carolina, because we can't prescribe hormones across state lines. But we got lots of resources.
That's great. And so you yourself, you're still taking hormones, I'm guessing?
I do.
Are you in menopause?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. Yeah.
Yep.
And do you take estrogen, progesterone, testosterone?
Well, I don't take estrogen because my estrogen is still okay.
Yeah.
But I do take progesterone.
All right. Okay. Just curious. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope this was as educational for everybody else as it was for me. I loved it. It's exactly what I wanted to talk about. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. It was so fun.